Well, we are closing in on the end of a long journey. This has been over the last several weeks, even a couple of months. I think this has been through the Hobbies folders in the Strange As It Seems archives. And we still have a couple more episodes to go. We're closing in on the end, though. This has been an absolute cavalcade of characters, people that really spend their time doing the oddest of things. We got a guy coming up that has crossed the country 9 times. Check this out, walking in the opposite direction of the way he was traveling. Try to figure that one out. Speaking of journeys, too, we got people who've just ride trains as a habit. One guy like 40,000 miles, another guy like almost 70,000 miles of just riding trains. We got hobbies with animals. We got people who make stuff. Lots of people who do stuff. It's just an amazing. I've really enjoyed the last few episodes. It's going to be almost sad to see this one, this series of episodes end on Hobbies. These people are amazing to me, and I think too there's kind of a sense, a poignancy. I find it, just these people that kind of did amazing things in their lifetime. I guess we all want to be remembered in some way, right? We all kind of strive for that, whether it's having children or it's achieving things in life. We certainly celebrate that with athletic achievements. But as I go through this, I think of these people, and oftentimes I'll even look them up to see if there's any record of them online, and there isn't. I mean, all this happened, up to about 100 years ago, and there just wasn't really any record of these people. And so I think in some ways, it's kind of doing them honor and bringing them back into the digital age, as I'm doing with this brand, Strange As It Seems. Welcome back. This is Jeff Hicks, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hicks, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. We're back on Hobbies this week and next as well, and then we'll finish this a really extraordinary series up. But before we dive in to this final chapter, or chapters on Hobbies, I'd love to ask, please hit the bell to subscribe, hit the button to like, and by all means leave a comment. If you have a strange hobby or know of anyone who has a strange hobby, I'll be coming back around at some point to modern day stories. It'll probably take me a few more years to get through the archives. It's really a fascinating journey. All of them are basically grouped by subject in these folders, and this is really what makes Strange As It Seems unique in this genre of oddity. Comic strips and TV series, shows. There were 150 Universal film shorts, 600 radio broadcasts on CBS back in the 30s and 40s. But Strange As It Seems was about proving that every fact was true. And that's what's in these folders, and why I find it so fascinating, because you have here, and they used to call it dope. I love that. It's the old 40s word of inside information. So there's a bunch of people, notes in here of like, hey, here's the dope on this story or the dope on that story. But that was really it, right? Was the actual proof and the painstaking care my family took in cataloging every fact that went into every comic strip. It was really extraordinary, and that's really what I'm going to be doing probably for the next few years. And then once we get through the archives, I'm going to bring it back to the modern day and start talking about strange and unusual things that are happening in the world today. But we have so much more to go through, and let's get into it. And we'll kick off in this first folder that I came across in the last ones here in the back of Hobbies, and it's called Hobbies with Animals. And the first story in here, I think these are all from the era of Elsie Hicks, my grandmother, who took over the comic strip in 1948 when my grandfather died in a plane crash. So these are all kind of in the 1950s. But the first character here is a really interesting guy by the name of Charles Broley, a 72-year-old retired banker. During the past 13 years while wintering in Florida, he spent his time climbing 100-foot trees and banding young eagles. He's banded birds, I guess, well over 1,000. They've been found as far north as Nova Scotia, and it was really kind of a labor of love. There's a a lot of articles or letters in here from the chambers of commerce. I love the painstaking work that my parents, my grandparents, and really my entire family did proving these facts. And often this is pre-internet. You had phone books back then, and to find people, they had to write the Chamber of Commerce in that city to get the address, contact the person, get a photo for proof. And here's one of the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce where they were able to put him in touch with Charles Broly, and a great photograph of Charles with one of the eagles that he banded. He's now 72 years old. He's been climbing cypress trees in the west coast of Florida for a number of years to band these bald eagles. He's had many adventures in penetrating the swamps, dodging rattlesnakes, etc. And his chief concern has been the slow disappearance of bald eagles. And a great letter here on Charles Broly's stationery with the bald eagle. And he said, "Yes, I am still climbing trees. Recently, I gave 6 lectures in Philadelphia. After one of them, a gentleman came up and said, 'When you're as old as I am, you will not be climbing trees. I am 82. And I replied, "Do you want to bet money on that?" At Daytona Beach, Florida, after my lecture, the president of the local bird club said, "I have just discovered how Broly is able to play around in the treetops. I just learned that he spent 40 years in the Bank of Montreal and had to strike a balance every day." Charles Broly banding bald eagles in Florida. And here's Barbara Logan. She's a 19-year-old singing star. This is someone who I actually did find. She was quite the star. I think she was in a couple of movies back in the late, maybe late 40s, early 50s. Here she is at 19 years old. Her hobby was training wild animals. She's pursued the hobby since she was 14 years old. And here she is, a new singing star, old hand at taming lions, putting 500-pound cats through the paces. That's a strange hobby, especially for an actress. Well, here's another interesting guy with birds. Jack Estworthy. He's from Vancouver, British Columbia, has a collection of over 100 tropical birds. Many were brought from Tasmania by the retired sailor. The feed bill for his pets costs him about $1,400 annually. This is in 1952. And once again, really cool letter here on the Canadian Chamber of Commerce stationery. And then Jack's own stationery, aviculturist at the Baltimore Game Farm. Pheasants, waterfowl, singing canaries, and all kinds of foreign birds, fancy bantams, poultry. Lifetime experience devoted with love and enthusiasm. And here's Henry Kinney from Worcester, Mass. He's spent more than 50 years building a colony of tree swallows, estimated at 600 nest boxes spread across a 2-acre area. Here's this guy again. We featured him before, but kind of amazing. It's Hobbies with the animals. These aren't actually live animals, but this guy has a unique collection. Albert Novit does, of more than 6,000 miniature dogs. And they're at his Lady Lafayette Hotel. He wanted to make sure that John Hicks featured the Walterboro, South Carolina hotel. There's so many. Here's the photograph of the lobby. That's a really cool photograph of the lobby of the hotel in South Carolina. But my gosh, this guy sent so much information. We've got an article here. The unique South Carolina hotel has really gone to the dogs. But check this out. There's some pretty cool stuff in here, too. We have the State Magazine, Columbia, South Carolina, from 1949, and an article in here of him on that. And then another really cool, a full South Carolina magazine from August 1948, and also the June-July 1949 The Highway Traveler, the full magazines in here. These are really fun to go back in just sort of a journey back in time, but some really cool things that I'm going to store, more treasures from the archives. And I will say too, there will soon be a marketplace. I'm cataloging all of these archives. There's some wonderful magazine articles and newspaper articles, some in just beautiful mint condition, even these magazines. We're going to open up a marketplace too at the website at strangeasitseems.com. So if any of these items are of interest, or you want them, framed, or they're of particular interest to you or your family, please don't hesitate to write and let me know. There's just so much in these archives, and would love for people to have them. There's no reason for them to just sit in a storage space. So if there's anything in particular that you see that has value to you, just write, let me know, and happy to go back and find these things and get them to people that would love and cherish some of this amazing material that's in the archives. And that kind of wraps it up for the Hobbies with the Animals folder. Let's move in. I've kind of broken this into kind of people who make stuff, maybe, and people who do stuff. That seems to be kind of a way to organize this, because we're into Hobbies Miscellaneous now. But I'm going to start off with a really interesting, this is probably the oldest comic strip in these last few folders. Goes all the way back to 1931, and apparently this was a kind of a big thing back then that people were sending in, but they were drawing art on a typewriter. And so this was Jack LeBeau from Providence, Rhode Island, and it looks like John Hicks kind of took it. I don't know if he did a mimeograph or whatever, a copy of it, but really cool portrait of Abraham Lincoln drawn on a typewriter. And then I found another one in here, also looks like April of 1931. So this was a big year for this, I guess. But the Indian on the Buffalo Nickel. This was drawn on a typewriter, really cool, by Claire Ellingson from Minneapolis. And then even later, in 1931, we've got Daniel Davis, and he's at the St. Aloysius School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and it looks like a Greek or a Trojan kind of Iliad and Odyssey portrait there. And then he actually sent a couple of these in, and I've got the originals here. Daniel Davis, St. Aloysius School, that, right, the ones that he actually did on bond paper here. Here's a really cool one of a peacock, it looks like. That's absolutely beautiful. And then looks like another, I guess it's, this way, if you can tell, kind of a Greek. You get the cherub with the arrows, sort of done like a Greek plate, but kind of interesting. Art done on a typewriter. And here's a guy, this looks like an older comic shop. Not all the way back to 1933, but Mr. August Tabbert from Newton, Iowa. He makes walking sticks from old postage stamps, and looks like he worked for the Maytag Sales Corporation. I have a few letters here. I remember the old Maytag repairman, I think it was. The old ads, if you guys are my age and remember, he was always sitting around bored because he had nothing to do. Funny enough, but looks like August Tabbert worked for the Maytag Sales Corporation out of Newton, Iowa. But I got to thinking, it says in here that each cane requires 13,375 stamps. And I got to thinking now, 100 years later, can you imagine how valuable the stamp collection would be? I wonder if it lost value. Here the guy's putting all these stamps on these canes as a hobby, but if he still had the stamps, or the family did, I'd imagine that would be quite a valuable collection. I've been collecting those, by the way, as well. I've got a box over here where every time I come across, there's some of the original envelopes and the letters in here. So compiling quite a collection. Any of you guys are stamp collectors out there, would love to know if any of the stamps that I have in this in the archives, and again, I got years to go, but I probably will end up with maybe a pretty interesting and maybe even valuable collection of stamps here at Strange As It Seems. But here's August Tabbert and his walking sticks made from postage stamps. And here's Milton Honig from Philadelphia. He makes lifelike portraits from broken mirror glass. And I guess Milton Honig says that if he contracts 7 years bad luck each time he smashes a mirror, he's due to endure misfortune for the rest of his life, for he purposely has broken hundreds to supply the raw material. The odd hobby was born years ago when his daughter dropped and broke a mirror. Honig, impressed with the random design formed by the shattered looking glass, thanked the child rather than punishing her. He went to work. Since then, he has produced dozens of fine likenesses of famous persons in glass. He recently turned down $10,000 to do a mirror reproduction of the famous painting The Last Supper, feeling that he would never have time to complete the intricate scene. It looks like it was a really cool handwritten letters, which says "Hold for pics." I guess we got some photographs in, but there's a note here, please return them. Oh, here's a tiny photograph of Milton Honig, and of course the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce letters, but Milton Honig, who does portraits with broken glass. And then we've got P.T. Land here, linoleum artist. I guess he's a linoleum mechanic, maybe in the early days of the linoleum industry. He picks up the scraps that are left over after a new floor covering is laid, cuts shapes and cements them in place to form murals. Here's a really cool mural of a prairie wagon and Indians, I guess, that they used for the comic strip. And yeah, a couple of really cool letters here as well. Interesting. He says, "I do believe I'm the originator of the idea. I've never even heard, even so much as heard of this kind of work in linoleum." Yeah, I guess some of these have taken 100 or even 120 hours of time to make. Crazy. P.T. Land, linoleum artist. And here's George Lee from Glendale, California. He has an inlaid tea cart, contains 22,158 separate pieces of wood, requires 1,248 hours to complete. And I guess he was inspired. This is 1940, about a year before World War II, and he had a heated argument apparently with a friend who insisted that the best type of woodwork he had ever seen was produced by the Germans. And I guess that ruffled George Lee's patriotic dignity and set him to work to prove that Americans can turn out equal, if not superior, woodwork. And yeah, some awesome photographs of George with this absolutely magnificent tea table made with over 1,000 pieces and over 1,000 hours of dedication. And here's an interesting character. J.A. Beauparlant from Chicago erected in his backyard an 18-foot tall candle. Weighs over a ton. Some cool photographs of him, and check that out. I love this. His letterhead here. J.A. Beauparlant, House of 2,000 Candles. And I guess this was kind of inspired. This isn't going into 1942. He started the big candle on July 7th, 1941, and basically was burning it on every national holiday. And then the war started. He called it the peace candle. But since America's entrance into the war, which would have happened in December of that year, he renamed it the Victory Candle and redecorated it in the national colors, red, white, and blue. Wow, he expects a long war. For first time today to birthday, J.A. Beauparlant lights the world's largest candle, says he's going to light it every holiday while the war lasts, since the candle is 18 feet 3 inches high and weighs 2,205 pounds. Well, looks like it's going to be a long war. I love this one. This is from Cushing, Oklahoma. We'd love to know if the family still has these. What an amazing thing this guy did. Upon the birth of each of his 3 children, Orlando Blackburn has published a complete miniature newspaper and he actually sent a copy of all 3 of them. These things are awesome. I wonder if the family still has them or has them framed. But we've got August 19th, 1937. He called it the Stork Herald. Mrs. Rowe Blackburn. So baby is born on parents' wedding anniversary day. But check this out. He did an entire newspaper for the birth of each child. Here's July 29th, 1934. And this is James Blackburn is here. I'm trying to be gentle with these because they're really old. But how about that? And then one more time in 1942, July 31st, Louise and Jimmy get new brother. William is a 9-pounder, has blue eyes, but I love all the ads. I mean, this guy, William and Marshall are names chosen, and then they have a picture here of the ancestors. But he did a full newspaper, miniature newspaper for the birth of each child. If anybody from the Blackburn family wants these too, I don't know, you probably still have them, but what family treasures those are. And then a letter here from Orlando Blackburn, who I guess worked for the Cushing Daily Citizen. That's how he was able to produce these newspapers. The Stork Herald. And a couple more table makers. Here's Burton Blair. He made a table of wood from 17 different countries. This is 1931 from John Hicks. This came out of the Popular Science Monthly. It spent 3 years making the table from 1,557 pieces of wood. And that'll flow us right in. I've got a few more here, all from the Elsie Hicks era. But here's an inlaid table made by O. Olson from San Gabriel, California. Has 64 different types of wood collected from all over the world, and a beautiful letter on his stationery where he features that inlaid parquetry, mosaic mantles, general contractor. Pretty amazing table as well. I wonder if the Olson family still has that beautiful work of art from San Gabriel, California. And an interesting craftsman here, pipes with personalities, carved by hand from M.J. Felsen, Burbank, California. He designs the carvings to depict the interest associated with the recipient. His own collection commemorates some of the events connected to his naval career. And there's a photograph, beautifully carved pipes. My goodness, what a craftsman there. With a cowboy pipe in his mouth, M.J. Felsen of Burbank carves the head for another pipe at his workbench. And a really cool letter in here as well from Blackie Felsen, as he was known, I guess. I happen to have some of the finest briar in the world. I was fortunate to have picked up a good supply in Algeria while I was in the service, and I created the round and boot designs to permit carving monograms, and especially to permit carving some design to commemorate incidents which happened during his years of service. That's great. Sorry I don't have a good picture at the moment, but he's got carvings of Lucille Ball, Johnny Ray, Jimmy Durante, Milton Berle, with teeth carved from ivory. Crazy. Johnny Ray, the pipe, has hearing aid, plastic tears, ivory teeth. I guess it was on TV. Tat snaps shows some of my latest, including one for Frank Folsom, president of the RCA. He wrote me, said it was the most beautiful and best smoking pipe he ever owned. I love this too on page 2. I have made 42 to date. No two ever have the same design. And when I reach 50, there will be no more, as I want them to be collector's items. I have very urgent pleas for these pipes, but I keep the quantity down. It takes about 8 hours of steady work. We'd love to hear from the Felsen family. Apparently there's only 50 made, but are there any more of these fabulous Felsen pipes lying around? Let me know. And here's a maker of a castle. Because he dreamed in his childhood of living in a castle, Theodore Bettendorf of Fox River Grove, Illinois, started to build his dream castle 20 years ago, made entirely by hand in his spare time. The castle's complete with a drawbridge, moat, and lookout towers. I love this. Here's a little handwritten letter. Miss Hicks, is this a toy castle or large enough to live in? And can one go out and see it? Do you have directions on how to get there? Thank you, Margaret Wolski. Let me know. I'd be curious to see if the Theodore Bettendorf Castle in Fox River Grove, Illinois, I wonder if it's still there. I love this too. A lot of people's hobbies kind of emanate from the work that they do, like the linoleum mechanic who then became a linoleum artist. And here's a barber, Eugen Oaks, I guess is better at, no longer active as a barber in his beauty shop in Frankfurt, Germany. He occupies himself by making paintings from the hair clipped from his customers. Crazy. I don't have any photographs in here, but here's the article. Eugen Oaks, barber in Frankfurt, Germany. The white horse was made from hairs from Oaks' own beard. And again, I love these letters. German Tourist Information Office that helped Elsie, my grandmother, get in touch with Eugen. But quite an interesting artist there, making paintings from hair. And here's a Guy Thayer, owner of the Thayer's Woodworking Shop, Gleason Road in Rutland, Vermont. Nice letter here from Guy Thayer. He belongs apparently to the Wood Collectors Society, number 225. It's about 6 months exchanging or buying specimens to complete this. It's a U.S. map made of wood by Guy Thayer. Each state is cut from the wood of each state's state tree. Pretty cool. Amazing. They're about 2 feet by 3 feet 6 inches. The background is 1/4 inch pine plywood, and each state is cut out of a 1/4 inch wood from each state tree. I wonder if that's still around. Let's wrap this episode up. I think we've pretty much gotten through all the people that make stuff, and tons more with people that do stuff for hobbies. So I'll save that for the next episode, and we'll wrap up with this one. This 1955 apparently came from Selvage and Lee, the public relations. I love this letter. Dear Elsie, as to your question of whether the caffeine content of beans from the same tree in the same year vary widely, 30 times as much in some cases, I think we have a rather disappointing answer for you. We check with the expert sources and find that usually the caffeine content runs from 1% to 1.8%. So as far as we can determine, there's never great variation there, but I have something that will make up for the loss of the item. Enclosed is a picture and a release which we have prepared for drugstore trade publications, and it tells how a druggist in Indiana revived the personalized shaving mug idea of old-time barbershops by putting the names of customers at his lunch counter on coffee cups. You'll see when you read the story that it paid off. So what we have here is personalized coffee cups by Joseph Wickham. He's a druggist whose hobby is ceramics, personally made over 500 cups for regular customers. And there's the photograph of all his regular customers. And it says here he is reaching for one of his 500 regular coffee customers' cups, who's coming in principally because his personalized mug will be ready by the time he gets to the counter. Wickham has tripled his business in all departments because of the personalized coffee cup idea. Well, that wraps it up for this second to last episode. We still got more to go. One last marathon episode here to wrap up this long-running series on hobbies in Strange as It Seems, and I'll wrap this episode up. But before I do, please hit the bell to subscribe, hit the button to like, and by all means leave a comment, especially if you're related to or know anyone or have any of these amazing creations that people did. Amazing what people did in their spare time back in the day when they didn't have phones to swipe and Netflix to flip through, right? Crazy. But I'll leave you, as I always do, from the foreword of John Hicks's book that he published back in 1928, at the very beginning of Strange as It Seems, where he said, "The author launches this book of the curious in nature and humankind on the vast sea of public opinion with the hope that it will fulfill its mission to entertain and acquaint its readers with some of the marvels of the world in which we live."